Thank you for hanging around. I know, I've said this before. I know it must be tedious at times to listen to my rants. I don't know what else to do. Truth seekers, I cannot approach these topics with in any kind of emotional stability or balance. I can't do it because it's become way, way too serious, too threatening, too frightening to me as an American, as somebody who respects our Constitution, what it says, not how it's been fulfilled, because it hasn't been. But I respect the Constitution. I respect the efforts made to fulfill that Constitution. I think we need more time, sadly, because we are humans, and humans are one of the most, if not the most, destructive species crawling around on the surface of this little blue dot. So we need a little more time, and for the Christian terrorists to destroy the last best hope, and that is through our system of self-government, to me, is just enraging. And plus the fact that, you know, I have family, I have friends, I know people, and I don't want to see, even though I won't be here to see it, I don't want to think about, as I step off this earthly coil, what could happen to people because of the madness of these Christian terrorists? What could happen to this planet? So yeah, I get very incensed. This increased targeting, threats, death threats against the judge, against his family or her family, against their property, their home. I mean, this comes because the Christian terrorists are destroying trust in public institutions. And the crazed, sick rhetoric of these bastards, thanks to social media, escalates. And it's part of a pattern that a guy named Steven Levitsky, he's a Harvard political scientist, and the co-author of the book, I'm sure you heard about it, entitled How Democracies Die. And Levitsky said this, quote, "This is a classic precursor of a democratic breakdown. To call this a warning sign is an understatement." End quote. He's referencing, of course, the threat against our judicial system and the corruption, the pollution, the takedown of our political system by this scummy son of a bitch, Donald Trump, and the filth that sees him as some kind of a messiah. Jesus God. You see, it was the Orange Vomit's initial presidential campaign. And if you remember, during the campaign, he condemned a judge who ruled against him in a lawsuit over the phony fucking con he was running, the grift he was running called Trump University. Remember that joke, right? And Trump's attack on that judge changed the ground rules for the crazy fuckers that think Trump is the Messiah, where it concerns threats and explosive rhetoric by a political figure, by a national figure. And that's according to Matthew Weil. He's executive director of the Democracy Initiative at an organization called the Bipartisan Policy Center in D.C. And this is what he said, quote, "There are threats everywhere now. It's become more normalized because he," referencing the Orange Vomit, "he changed what was allowed in public discourse." End quote. And then I'm going to quote someone else for you. This guy, Nathan Hall, he's a principal consultant with the National Center for State Courts. And Mr. Hall noted that the combination of this decline in public trust of our institutions, coupled with access to the addresses and personal information of judges, that has an impact on everyone from Supreme Court justices to otherwise anonymous state court justices or federal judges. Mr. Hall says, quote, "This gets to the core issue of having equal access to justice, a core foundational principle of our ability to function as a third and independent branch of government, judicial branch." He says, "It's really shaken us to the core. Judges are just people at the end of the day. They put on a robe, but they still go home to their families," end quote. And of course, the most recent warning sign came after last week's search at the nest of these vermin, Mar-a-Lago in Florida. If you remember, FBI agents seized 11 sets of classified information, yada, 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 because the Justice Department is now investigating whether or not the Espionage Act was violated by this filthy Nazi prick Donald Trump and other laws. And in response, the Orange Vomit accuses the government of abuse of power in targeting him. Well, of course, he's above the law. He's Donald Jesus Christ Trump. And then his supporters went nuts online. The millions of people who see this useless lump of shit as something that they worship, which describes the worshipers more than the worshipped. But they go online targeting the FBI, Department of Justice. And then that crazy fucker who posted threats against the FBI on Trump's toy social media was shot dead by authorities after he tried to storm the FBI Cincinnati office. Why don't more of you fuckers try that, huh? These are not people inside a church praying. These are not people in a shopping mall going about their business. These are not kids in a school. These are not people in a theater. This is the FB fucking I. So if you want to play your little gun games, you Nazi bastards, try it at an FBI office. Huh? Crazy fuckers. Trump and his scum, his supporting scum, have waged rhetorical war against the FBI for years. Ever since the investigation into his initial campaign being aided by Russia in 2016, which, if you have a brain, you know that what that happened. It absolutely fucking happened. So this intense focus on an individual judge like Reinhardt is relatively new. The Trump scum have gone after the entire branch of government, the judicial branch, because in the Christian terrorist canon of how you run a society, there is no review. There is no need for separate judging or justices. All you need are the ministers, like the ones who sit in Gilead and decide the fate, the ones who sat in the Inquisitions, the ones who sat in the Holocaust, the ones who sat in just about every Christian act of terrorism in the past 1,800 years. To the Christian terrorists, that's all that's necessary. They don't need an elected branch of government, a legislative branch, because everything is predetermined by the bullshit written in their books, their holy books, their texts, and by the leaders of this cult that have emerged who say that trans children should be thrown out of school. Trans children should be converted back into being whatever they were before they realized they weren't how they were identified. Or that gay people, the judges, the Christian judges, will tell you, well, love the sin, or hate the sin, love the sinner. You fuckers. I swear to God. But this is what's happening. You do get that. So here's another. Gretchen Helmke. She's a political scientist, University of Rochester, New York. And she says that Trump's action, and we know this, but I want to quote her. She said it mirrors what demagogues have done in other countries where democracy has collapsed. Professor Helmke says, quote, a popularly elected leader targeting a judiciary is often one early indicator of democratic erosion, end quote. I would change that to democratic collapse. But I'm not a professor. Anyway, this professor, Gretchen Helmke, she cited Venezuela, Bolivia, Peru as just 3 places where an incoming administration vowed to clean up the judiciary and then stacked it with their own Christian terrorists. The people put in place in the judiciary in Venezuela, Bolivia, and Peru were not Jews. They were not Muslims. They were not Hindus. They were Christians. And they made the situation 100 times worse. Now, getting over to this guy in New York, a Republican, that's how Associated Press identifies him. He's not a Republican. He's a Christian terrorist. But he's a candidate for Congress in Western New York. You know who I'm talking about? Carl Palladino, this Nazi fucker. Oh my God, is this guy an Italian fascist, right? Right up there with Mussolini. Right, Carl? But he was being interviewed on a radio program, and he said that U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, quote, should be executed, end quote, for authorizing the search of Donald Jesus Christ Trump's nest. He made the comment in an interview with, of course, this filthy hole Breitbart News about a week ago. And during this interview with Breitbart Sewer, Palladino was criticizing Joe Biden for what Palladino said was a lack of leadership and disengagement from government. Idiotic fucker. Palladino, not Biden. This is what he said, quote, so we have a couple of unelected people who are running our government. Unelected people. In an administration of people like Garland, who should not only be impeached, he should be executed. The guy is just lost. He's a lost soul. He's trying to get an image, and his image, his methodology is just terrible. To raid the home of a former president is just, well, people are scratching their heads and they're saying, what's wrong with this guy? End quote, Palladino. And he's referencing Merrick Garland, who is trying to maintain the last remaining shreds of the rule of law in this country that has been beaten into a fucking unrecognizable, almost, pulp by the Christian terrorists on the state level, county level, federal level. And a short time later in the interview, after some producer somewhere in the Breitbart sewer told the host, Matthew Boyle, hey, listen, that's pretty fucking strange. You better get a clarification on that. So Matthew Boyle asked this Nazi fucker Palladino about, well, what did you mean when you said that Garland should be executed? And Palladino, all of a sudden, tries to backtrack, although you know he meant what he said. But he says this, quote, oh, I'm just being facetious. The man should be removed from office. He shows his incompetence. You want to get his face in front of the people and show he's got some mettle to him. But his choice of issues and choice of methodology is very sad, end quote. Oh, Palladino, shut the fuck up. I mean, really, a loser bastard like this making comments on the Attorney General of the United States. I mean, it's just stunning. How much more can this not even 300-year-old democracy put up with this and still call itself a democratic republic? How much longer? However long it is, the Christian terrorists are willing to stick with it. Because, you see, they deal in death and eternity. To them, death is the transition point to their little heaven, their little bullshit heaven, where they get to, I don't know, sit on their asses all day and stare at the face of God. Is that it? Sick bastards. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.